4:13 a.m., Tuesday, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. 11 agents from the FBI's hostage rescue team moved through a quarter-mile of overgrown access road in absolute radio silence. No headlights. Night vision optics only. The temperature had dropped to 29 degrees. Frost covered the scrub brush on both sides of the gravel path. The agents moved in a staggered two-column formation, each man separated from the next by approximately 8 feet, boots placed deliberately to avoid loose gravel that could carry sound in the pre-dawn quiet. Their breath fogged in the cold. Nobody spoke. Hand signals only. Ahead, a 5-story anthracite coal breaker, sealed by the state in 2018, surrounded by chain-link fencing, posted with Pennsylvania DEP closure notices. The structure loomed against the darker mass of the ridge behind it, its silhouette familiar to anyone who had grown up in coal country. Stacked geometry of processing levels, elevated conveyor housings, the long shadow of a century of industrial work, now cold and quiet. Or almost quiet. The structure had no active permits, no licensed operator, no legal reason for anything inside it to be running. But something was running. ATF units were already positioned at 3 secondary egress points around the 47-acre brownfield. A perimeter team of 14 agents covered the old air shaft on the eastern slope, prone in the frost-covered scrub grass. Thermal scopes tracking the hillside exit of a tunnel that hadn't appeared on any DEP survey in 8 years. 2 Bureau helicopters held position 4 miles north, engines warm, lights off, pilots monitoring a common tactical frequency silent for the past 40 minutes. 11 women were somewhere inside that building. They had been inside for 96 days. What brought federal agents to an abandoned coal processing facility outside Hazleton in the pre-dawn hours was not a tip line call, not a suspicious neighbor, a conveyor belt. That detail, a conveyor belt running inside a structure with no operating permit, no power contract, no licensed personnel, was the thread that unraveled a mid-Atlantic trafficking network across 5 states. The thread was noticed by a man whose job was to fill out inspection forms, not rescue anyone. His name was Gerald Staub. He audited mine safety for Pennsylvania's DEP. On March 19, 2026, Staub was conducting a routine exterior compliance pass on the Hazleton brownfield. The property had quarterly checks since Keystone Anthracite Holdings filed for bankruptcy in 2018. No entry required. Walk the perimeter. Confirm the DEP seals are intact. Document any trespass or unauthorized access. Sign the form. The inspection should have taken 45 minutes. Staub was on his second pass of the northern fence line when he stopped. The wind was low that morning, temperature in the low 40s. A light overcast from the west had pressed the air flat. He stood still for a moment, clipboard at his side, looking at the upper levels of the breaker through the chain link. He could hear something he had no checkbox for. A low mechanical vibration, rhythmic and consistent, coming from the lower levels. Not a stress creak from the building settling in cold. Not wind moving through a compromised roof section. He had worked mine safety audits for 19 years. He recognized conveyor mechanics, the specific cadence of belt tension cycling over a drive roller, the undertone of a loaded system moving against resistance. He stood there for nearly 2 minutes listening before he moved. He documented it, filed an anomaly report through Musha by day's end. The report was specific, mechanical vibration consistent with conveyor operation, originating from lower levels of a sealed structure. No licensed activity on file, no permit exceptions in DEP records. He attached time-stamped site photographs and marked it as requiring expedited review. Through standard routing, that report would have reached a regional inspector in 2 weeks. Staub knew this. He made a second call, directly to the Musha field coordinator in Wilkes-Barre. He used the word unauthorized. He used the word active. He said, "I've been doing this for 19 years, and there is no reason for that building to be making that sound." The MESHA coordinator forwarded the report to ATF's Philadelphia Field Division within 48 hours. ATF flagged potential undisclosed power generation. A diesel generator inside a sealed structure meant structural hazard and evidence in multiple categories. They brought in the FBI's Philadelphia field office. Within 72 hours of Staub's report, the case had a joint task force designation. Now the question was, what was that conveyor running for? The coal breaker outside Hazleton was built in 1941. At full operation, it processed several hundred tons of anthracite per day, separating coal from waste rock through cascading conveyor systems, screens, and gravity chutes spread across 5 floors. When Keystone Anthracite Holdings shuttered operations in 2016 and filed for bankruptcy 2 years later, the DEP sealed the structure. The lower 3 floors were considered structurally stable. The upper 2 were not. What investigators did not know in those first surveillance days was that the lower 3 floors had been systematically modified over the preceding 5 months. Not renovated, not repaired, modified for one purpose: to divide space, restrict movement, and sustain people in prolonged confinement with minimal external signature. The conveyor noise was not incidental. It was functional. The main coal conveyor on the second lower level had been restarted not to process anything, but to mask the acoustic signature of a diesel generator powering lighting, heating units, and basic ventilation on levels 2 and 3. Anyone walking the perimeter would hear industrial machinery. That sound in a coal country setting was unremarkable. It was designed to be unremarkable. The network that built this understood something important. In rural Luzerne County, machine noise was not a red flag. It was background. The FBI's surveillance phase opened on March 23, 2026. Through exterior observation alone, a utility-style vehicle visited the property through a secondary service gate every 72 hours approximately. Night visits only, no markings. Access through a gate that should have been locked with a DEP seal. The seal had been replaced with a near-identical one. Laboratory comparison identified the substitution. The vehicle, a dark gray Ford Transit with Pennsylvania commercial plates, was tracked through cell site location data to a storage facility in West Hazleton on 2 separate occasions. The storage facility was placed under surveillance. It yielded 2 additional persons of interest within 4 days. Satellite thermal imaging, cleared through federal warrant on March 26th, told the first real story. 3 distinct heat signatures inside the lower breaker structure. 2 were consistent with the generator and the reactivated conveyor. The third signature was diffuse and distributed across approximately 3,000 square feet on the second lower level, consistent with multiple human bodies. Thermal imaging could not determine the exact count. The building's stone and concrete walls attenuated the signatures significantly. Based on thermal intensity and distribution, the range was estimated between 8 and 16 individuals. The case had just changed categories. What's most surprising about this case isn't the sophistication of the concealment, it's how close it came to never being found. Staub's anomaly report was the 3rd exterior inspection of that property in 12 months. The 2 previous auditors noted nothing. Staub heard the conveyor because on that specific morning, in those specific weather conditions, the wind was low and he stopped walking at the right moment. Had he been moving, the ambient noise would have covered it. 1 auditor, 1 still morning, 1 sound he had no checkbox for. 11 days of static surveillance ran from March 23rd through April 2nd, 2026. The Joint Task Force documented 6 vehicle visits, mapped the access gate mechanism, established the generator's fuel cycle, and intercepted 1 cellular transmission from within the structure's footprint. The transmission was encrypted, but its origin, inside a sealed, supposedly unoccupied building, was itself a data point. It was logged. During the 6th vehicle visit on April 1st, surveillance cameras positioned 600 feet from the service gate captured footage of the transit pulling through and remaining on the property for 53 minutes before departing. The footage did not clearly show individuals entering or exiting, but it captured the exterior long enough that FBI forensic analysts identified a partial VIN sequence from a plate reflection. That sequence led to a registered owner, an LLC incorporated in Chester County, Pennsylvania, 9 months earlier. One of the two listed officers matched a name already appearing in the Bureau's separate investigation into the Mid-Atlantic Labor Placement Network. The connection was made on April 2nd, the same day the confidential informant made contact. The confidential informant came in on day 9 of active surveillance, but the Bureau had been running a separate investigation since January 2026 into a Mid-Atlantic logistics and hospitality labor placement network operating under 3 different registered business names in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. The network had been advertising work placements through job boards, social media, and community flyers, hospitality roles, care work positions, short-term contract employment. The postings used real company logos, real industry language, real wage structures. They were indistinguishable from legitimate recruitment. The informant, whose identity remains sealed, had peripheral involvement in the logistics side, not in placement itself, but in transportation coordination. In the second week of April, the informant provided information the surveillance team had not connected. The Hazleton coal breaker was the network's 3rd holding location in 6 months. The women inside had been moved twice before, 2 previous locations, both vacated before law enforcement arrival. The network had an internal early warning system. It was not clear at the time of disclosure whether that system had been fully disabled. The case file now contained a time-critical variable. If the network's communication detected the surveillance operation, the holding site would be vacated again. Possibly within hours, the task force had a decision to make. Before finalizing the tactical plan, investigators needed to establish how many people were inside and where they were positioned. On April 3rd, the task force requested a second thermal imaging pass. The warrant was approved and executed on April 4th. The results refined the earlier estimate. The diffuse heat signature on the second lower level was now interpreted as consistent with 10 to 14 individuals concentrated in the northeastern quadrant. 2 smaller signatures, consistent with single individuals, were positioned near the generator and near the interior stairwell. The task force also conducted a discreet interview on April 3rd with a former Keystone anthracite maintenance supervisor who had worked in the Hazleton breaker from 2008 through 2015. The interview lasted 4 hours. The supervisor provided detailed floor-by-floor descriptions of the lower 3 levels, identified interior stairwell locations, noted which internal doors were steel-framed and which were hollow-core industrial, and confirmed that the second lower level had previously been used as a staging area, meaning it had its own water access point and electrical subpanel, both suitable for the modifications investigators suspected. The supervisor did not know what his information was being used for. He was told it was a structural assessment for a potential remediation contract. He answered every question thoroughly. The interview was transcribed and entered into the case file. His identity is not referenced in any public document. The women inside the coal breaker had been reported missing from 5 states over 4 months. Their ages ranged from 22 to 41. They had been recruited through fake hospitality and care work job postings. Some responded online, some through physical flyers distributed in transit hubs, community centers, and laundromats across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, and Delaware. The postings described short-term placements, accommodation provided, transportation arranged, wage rates were competitive. The application process was detailed and professional. Candidates received follow-up emails from registered business domains. Some received phone interviews. At least 3 received what appeared to be formal offer letters on company letterhead. 11 women reported missing on 11 separate dates. Some had family members who filed reports within days. Some had no one who noticed for weeks. Between November 2025 and February 2026, they had each, in different cities, accepted an offer that looked like work and turned into something else. One was 23 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. She had graduated from a 2-year culinary program in May of 2025. The job posting she responded to described a hospitality coordinator position at a hotel group with properties in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. She told her roommate she was going for a working interview and would be back by the following weekend. Her roommate filed a missing persons report with Columbus Police on the 8th day after she left. The report was entered into a NULSIC. It did not generate a federal cross-reference flag for 11 weeks. Another was 38, from Baltimore. She had 2 dependents. She was working 2 part-time jobs and looking for something more stable. The posting she responded to described a care work placement with a senior living group, flexible hours, housing stipend included. Her sister filed the missing persons report. She called the number on the posting 3 times before she called the police. The number rang through to a voicemail box that was cleared twice during the period she was calling. Nobody called her back. These are 2 of 11. The case file contains 11 separate victim intake narratives, compiled by FBI Victim Services coordinators in the days following the recovery operation. Those narratives are not public, but the pattern is consistent. A professional-looking recruitment process that mimicked legitimate employment, followed by a transportation arrangement that removed the women from their home areas before the nature of what was happening became clear. The network specifically targeted women in economic transition, between jobs, between cities, looking for stability. The job postings appeared on platforms those women were already using. Wage offers were calibrated to be attractive, without being implausible. Application timelines were fast, framed as employer enthusiasm. Every element of the recruitment process was designed to answer the questions a cautious person would ask before accepting a job offer from an unfamiliar company. One detail in the investigation file is worth pausing on. The court transcripts run over 300 pages, but a single notation near the back carries the most weight. One of the recovered phones, belonging to a network operative, contained a partial GPS log the operative had failed to wipe. The log covered 31 days of movement. It documented 2 prior holding locations, one in Carbon County, Pennsylvania, and one in western New Jersey. Both had been cleared before law enforcement contact. The GPS data also showed the route used to transport the women to Hazleton on January 28, 2026. That data point triggered the parallel indictment track. Prosecutors in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, and Delaware were briefed on April 3rd. 5 additional arrest warrants covering network members not present at Hazleton were prepared and held in sealed status pending the rescue operation. The reason for the operational hold was tactical. Executing those arrests before the breach would risk tipping the on-site personnel. The network's internal early warning system was believed to involve at least one outside contact who monitored for law enforcement activity. If any of the 5 targets went into custody before the breach, the Coalbreaker site might receive a warning. So everyone waited. On April 5th, the FBI's Evidence Response Team lead submitted a memo outlining specific evidence preservation priorities for the breach operation. The memo ran 9 pages. It covered the generator and its fuel records, the modified interior door and its installation hardware, the cellular device or devices likely on site, the water and sanitation systems, and any paper or digital records in the operative staging areas. It also identified the conveyor system as a priority forensic target, specifically the drive motor housing and the power connection, which would carry physical evidence of the modifications. The memo noted that the conveyor modification required specialized electrical knowledge and that the components might be traceable to a specific supplier. That detail, the conveyor modification components, became the basis for a supplemental investigative thread still active as of this filing. The drive motor housing examined on April 9th, contained a replacement contactor relay, not commonly available through standard industrial channels. It had been sourced through a specialty electrical distributor. That distributor's records are under subpoena. The tactical plan was finalized on April 4th, 2026. FBI HRT would execute primary entry through the main ground-level access on the structure's north face. A secondary team would hold the service gate on the south fence line. ATF units would cover 3 perimeter exit vectors, including the old mine airshaft on the eastern slope, a horizontal tunnel approximately 60 feet long, partially collapsed, that emerged through a hillside roughly 200 yards from the main structure. That airshaft was not in the original DEP site survey. It appeared in a historical mine map from 1957 that an FBI analyst located in the Pennsylvania State Archives on April 2nd. Had the analyst not pulled those maps, the shaft would not have been covered. This is what the case file under all its federal language actually shows: a chain of small human decisions. A compliance auditor who stopped walking, an analyst who pulled historical records, an informant who chose a specific week to make contact. Remove any one of those decisions and the outcome changes. Put yourself in the position of the HRT team leader at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, holding at the perimeter of a sealed industrial building, with 11 women somewhere inside and an unknown number of armed men who may or may not already know you are there. The intelligence is 11 days old in its static surveillance component. The informant contact is 72 hours old. The GPS log is real, but it tells you where they were, not exactly where they are positioned right now. You have the building plan from a 1957 archive map. You have thermal imaging that has not been refreshed in 18 hours. You make the call. The breach commenced at 4:13 a.m. on April 8, 2026. HRT entry through the north face was completed in under 40 seconds. The main ground-level door had been fitted with a steel bar and padlock on the interior. It was removed with a hydraulic ram. The team moved to the interior stairwell, heading down to the second lower level. The stairwell was concrete, narrow, and unlit below the first landing. The team moved on night vision, single file, 2-second spacing, with the point man reading angles at each turn, against the 1957 floor plan he had memorized over the preceding 48 hours. 3 men were located inside the structure. 2 were on the second lower level, in a sectioned-off area adjacent to the generator. 1 was attempting to access the old airshaft tunnel when ATF units on the eastern perimeter intercepted him. All 3 were armed. All 3 were taken into custody without any exchange of fire. The ATF intercept at the airshaft took approximately 4 minutes. The operative had already entered the tunnel when ATF made contact at the exit point. He had gone approximately 30 feet into the 60-foot tunnel before ATF agents at the far end identified themselves and ordered him to stop. He complied. He was removed from the tunnel in restraints at 4:21 a.m. The 2 men on the second lower level were located in adjacent positions near the generator. The HRT team reached them within 90 seconds of the initial breach. Neither had time to reach a firing position. Both were secured within 3 minutes of the team's arrival. A subsequent search of their immediate area recovered 2 handguns, a prepaid cellular phone, and a laminated document that turned out to be a hand-drawn interior map of the second and third lower levels. A map showing the location of the women's confinement area in more precise detail than the 1957 mine plan. That laminated map is now in federal evidence storage. The 11 women were located in a locked section of the second lower level, behind a steel door installed in the coal breaker's existing interior framework. The section had been divided into 3 compartments. Each was accessible from a single corridor. The generator provided power for lighting and 2 space heaters, a water line connected to a portable tank, a chemical toilet arrangement. All 11 were alive. Medical units were staged at the property boundary. 11 emergency response personnel moved through the service gate within minutes of the breach team's all-clear signal. On-site triage began at 4:26 a.m. All 11 women received immediate medical care at the scene before transfer. Conditions were consistent with prolonged confinement. 7 were transported by ambulance to facilities in Hazleton and Wilkes-Barre. 4 were transported by air to a regional trauma center. Their names have not been publicly released. Their families were notified through FBI Victim Services coordinators within 2 hours of the operation's conclusion. The FBI Victim Services coordinators, who made those calls, had been briefed and staged since the previous evening. There were 11 of them, 1 assigned to each case, with corresponding family contact information already in hand. The calls were made from a staging location in a hotel conference room in Hazleton, beginning at approximately 6:15 a.m. The coordinators had been told to expect that some families would not believe them at first. Several did not. The coordinator handling the Columbus case, the 23-year-old who had left for a working interview, later described the moment the woman's roommate understood what she was being told. The roommate had kept the missing persons report active for 11 weeks. She had called the Columbus police tip line 17 times. The 3 men taken into custody at the scene were identified as mid-level network operatives. None were the network's operational leadership. That fact, that the people who built this, who selected these women, who ran the placement fraud across 5 states, were not in the building, was apparent to investigators within hours. Within 6 hours of the arrests, all 3 were in separate federal holding facilities, and none had made any statement beyond requesting counsel. Their phones were in the hands of the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey team. The forensic extraction process on the prepaid device found near the generator produced results within 22 hours. The results are referenced extensively in the sealed portions of the case file. The unsealed portions note only that the device's contact list and message history provided investigative leads in multiple jurisdictions. The 2 men taken from the generator area were processed at the Scranton Federal Holding Facility. During intake, one of them, a man in his mid-30s who had not spoken since his arrest, asked a processing agent whether the others had been arrested. The agent documented the question and its context. Investigators interpreted it as an indicator that the operative believed the early warning system had functioned, that someone outside the building had been notified, and that he expected to learn whether that notification had triggered an emergency response from the network. The question told investigators something important. He did not know how much the operation had been compromised from the inside. He thought he was walking into a situation where his network might still be partially intact. He was not. Here is the take that will probably draw some argument. The real systemic failure in this case is not that the network operated for 4 months before discovery. Networks like this are designed to evade detection, and some operational window is unavoidable. The failure is that 11 separate missing persons reports, filed across 5 states between November and February, were not generating a consolidated federal pattern flag. 11 women, 5 states, a 4-month window. The reports existed in individual state and local databases. The aggregation that would have connected them simply did not happen quickly enough. That is not a criticism of any single law enforcement agency. It is a description of a structural gap in how missing persons data moves between jurisdictions. The GPS log on the recovered phone told investigators something the 5-state missing persons database had not. These 11 cases were one case. The network had specifically chosen recruitment targets from different states, different cities, different demographic backgrounds, not because of any characteristic of the women themselves, but because geographic and demographic distribution made the cases harder to aggregate into a recognizable pattern. This was deliberate operational design. The 5 sealed indictments were executed simultaneously at 5:47 a.m. on April 8th, 34 minutes after the coal breaker breach was complete. Coordinated arrests occurred in Philadelphia, Camden, Columbus, Baltimore, and Wilmington. 5 additional network members, taken into custody within the same operational window, The coordination between 5 separate U.S. attorneys' offices and their corresponding FBI field divisions had been running in preparation since April 3rd. One of the 5 additional targets was not at his registered address when federal agents arrived in Camden at 5:47 a.m. His vehicle was gone. A neighbor reported seeing him leave approximately 90 minutes before the arrest team arrived. Whether the departure was coincidental or whether he had received some form of warning remains a matter the case file does not resolve. He was apprehended at a bus terminal in Trenton, New Jersey at 9:12 a.m. that same morning, following a BOLO issued through New Jersey State Police. The network's financial structure, as documented in the indictment materials, operated through 3 registered LLCs in Pennsylvania and Maryland, all with legitimate business designations in the hospitality and staffing sectors. Bank accounts associated with the LLCs received deposits consistent with ongoing income sources. The placement fraud, the fake job recruitment, was layered into the LLC's operational documentation in a way that, on initial review, appeared to be routine labor placement activity. It was not until forensic accountants began working the records in the days following the arrests that the full financial architecture became visible. One detail stayed with investigators reviewing the financial records. The Camden network member who nearly avoided arrest had, in the 48 hours before the breach, initiated 3 wire transfers totaling approximately $240,000 from one of the LLC accounts to a correspondent account in a jurisdiction the case file does not publicly name. The transfers were flagged by FinCEN. They had not yet cleared. They were frozen as part of the asset seizure executed concurrent with the arrests. The approximately $240,000 is now in federal custody. The destination account is under active investigation. The forensic accounting work conducted in the 2 weeks following the arrests identified a secondary financial layer not visible in the LLC records alone. A series of payments, routed through a payment processing intermediary registered in a different state, connected the LLC accounts to 17 individual recipients over a 14-month period. The payment amounts ranged from several hundred to several $1,000s per transaction. The recipients included individuals in 6 states. None were among the 8 people arrested on April 8th. The forensic accountants flagged all 17 payment recipients as subjects of interest. The status of those referrals is not addressed in any publicly available filing. The coal breaker has been resealed by DEP under an amended closure order. The forensic examination of the interior was completed over 6 days following the operation. Evidence collected included the modified steel interior door, the generator and its fuel logs, the portable water and sanitation systems, and multiple personal items belonging to the 11 women. The cellular device containing the partial GPS log was collected and preserved. The forensic team also documented the full extent of the interior modifications: the steel door installation, the compartment dividers on the second lower level, the extension of the generator power supply through conduit runs, threaded through existing cable chase openings, and the conveyor system's restarted drive mechanism. The modifications showed significant advanced planning. The steel door alone required custom fabrication. It had been fitted to a non-standard opening in the existing masonry. The fabrication marks on the door frame were photographed and entered into evidence. The GPS log documented not just the 2 prior holding locations, but also a series of intermediate stops, rest areas, fuel stations, parking lots, along the transit routes used to move the women. Those intermediate locations are now part of the ongoing investigation. They represent potential evidence of additional network infrastructure, safe houses, vehicle storage points, contacts who provided logistical support without necessarily participating directly in the placement fraud or the confinement operation. The network, as it is currently understood, extended to at least 8 states. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, and Delaware were the recruitment and holding states. The indictment materials reference activity in 3 additional states not named in the unsealed portions of the case file. The full geographic scope has not been made public. There is a line in the indictment documents that reads, in the language of federal charging instruments, almost like a technical specification, defendants caused victims to be transported across state lines by means of materially false representations regarding the nature and terms of employment, and thereafter caused victims to be held in a confined location through force, fraud, and coercion. 38 words. They cover 4 months of 11 women's lives. The case, as of late June 2026, remains partially sealed. 5 of the 8 suspects taken into custody have entered not guilty pleas in their respective jurisdictions. 3 have requested federal public defenders. The Camden suspect arrested at the Trenton bus terminal has a separate bail hearing scheduled. The network's operational leadership, the individuals who designed the placement fraud, selected the holding locations, and managed the early warning system that allowed 2 prior sites to be vacated before law enforcement arrival, have not been publicly identified in any unsealed indictment materials. The case file references them as additional unindicted co-conspirators. The 5 additional indictments cover the people who executed. They do not appear to cover the people who planned. Gerald Staub, the DEP compliance auditor, filed his anomaly report on March 19th. He was interviewed by FBI investigators on March 25th. The interview lasted 2 hours. Investigators showed him photographs of the property's interior, photographs he had not taken, photographs captured through the surveillance operation his report had triggered. He identified the conveyor system he had heard from the northern fence line. He confirmed the acoustic characteristics were consistent with what he had documented in his anomaly report. He answered every question asked of him. He asked no questions of his own. He has not made any public statements. His name appears once in the publicly accessible portions of the case file, in the section documenting the initial investigation trigger. 1 sentence. The partial GPS log that documented 31 days of network movement and 2 prior holding locations, the data point that accelerated the indictment timeline across 5 states, was on a phone that had been scheduled for factory reset. The reset had been initiated, but not completed when the device was seized. 11 minutes more, and that data would have been gone. 11 minutes. The 11 women recovered from the Hazleton coal breaker on April 8, 2026, were reported missing across 5 states over a period of 4 months. As of the current date, all 11 have been discharged from medical care. Their identities remain protected under federal victim confidentiality provisions. The network's recruitment infrastructure, the job board accounts, the social media profiles, the flyer distribution channels, was taken down by platform operators following FBI notification in the days after the arrests. New accounts, using similar language and similar positioning, have since appeared on several of the same platforms. They are currently under federal monitoring. The structure that held these 11 women for 96 days still stands in Luzerne County. It is sealed again. The conveyor belt is no longer running. The demand that created the network that put them inside it has not been dismantled. It has not been charged. It has no address. This case will have sequels, not this specific network, which is now disrupted, but the template it operated from. Fake job listings, distributed recruitment, jurisdictional fragmentation, industrial concealment infrastructure. That template is documented now in federal case files across 5 states. Its components are available to anyone who wants to study them. The question that the investigation has not publicly answered, and may not answer in the unsealed portions of the case file, is who selected the Hazleton coal breaker. The 2 prior locations were properties with different ownership structures, different regional footprints, different concealment characteristics. Someone with specific knowledge of the region's industrial real estate inventory, specifically of which sealed and bankrupt properties had viable interior infrastructure, selected these locations. That knowledge is not general knowledge, it is specialized, and that person, whoever they are, has not been identified in any public filing. The case file remains sealed. 5 additional indictments are active across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, and Delaware. The operational leadership of the network remains unindicted. Somewhere right now, that GPS log data is being worked by federal analysts tracking every intermediate stop it documented. The coal breaker was the end of one chain. The analysts are looking for the beginning